Hello friends, welcome to yet another session on essay perspectives. Topic for today is history repeats first as tragedy and then as farce. Before we proceed, as always, I have a personal request. My book on ethics, integrity and aptitude, third edition has been released. Unfortunately, it has been pirated, but pirated book is of very low quality. I urge all of you to buy original. Original books can be bought from the seller Arvind India on Flipkart and affordable on Amazon. Friends, as for every essay, this essay also has to be conceptualized as being made of various components and subcomponents. First we have to introduce the topic, then we have to elaborate on the essence of the topic, then we should explain why history would repeat itself as tragedy and farce. Then we have to introduce an element of analysis, and we have to argue, or we have to explore why history cannot repeat as otherwise. That means why history would always repeat as tragedy or a farce. Why can it not repeat as comedy or something like that? Then we should conclude. Friends, I feel the best way to start this essay is by giving reference to our UPSC preparation itself. All of us have experienced that, friends. In the first attempt we commit some mistakes. Once we commit some mistakes, then we would actually go to the second attempt. If we don't correct our mistakes in the second attempt, then that would act as tragedy. Correct? Then we will go to the third attempt. Even in the third attempt, if we don't correct our mistakes, then that would be looked at as absurd, ridiculous. Correct, right? Let us say in the first attempt you cleared prelims and you have gone to mains. While writing the mains, you have not done writing practice. Then you go to the second attempt. In the second attempt also you don't do the writing practice, then it is like a tragedy. But in the third attempt also, if you don't do writing practice and then don't get through mains, then everybody would laugh at you. Thus, history has the tendency to repeat itself first as tragedy and then as farce. Friends, for these topics actually elaborating on the essence of the topic is quintessential. So here the first we have to explain the meaning of history, meaning of tragedy and meaning of farce. Basically, what is history? History is scientific study of turn of events that have happened in the past, right? But for the sake of this essay, history actually means the turn of events or turn of happenings, correct? Then what is tragedy? Tragedy is any event that ends in pain, any event that ends in failure, any event that ends in negativity, correct? Then what is farce? Farce is basically absurdity. Farce is basically ridicule, correct? So combining all these things, all these meanings, we have to explain the meaning of history repeats itself first as tragedy and then as farce, correct? That what does that exactly mean? The topic essentially means the turn of events that have once happened have the tendency to recur, okay? But once they recur, the first recurrence would actually end in pain, negativity. But the second recurrence is always looked at by people as farce. That means as absurdity. Friends, to elaborate, see, first, once the turn of events recur for the first time, everybody would be sympathetic. Everybody would think, this has happened to them or happened to these people again. Everybody would feel the pain. Everybody would empathize, would sympathize. Okay, then that is looked at as tragedy. Correct. But when it recurs for the second time, then people would laugh at it. Why would people laugh at it? There are again two angles for it. One is that people laugh at such recurrence because they are used to seeing it as tragedy. So once you experience an event again and again, then again over a period of time you become numb to it and you don't take it seriously actually. There is an old adage in rural areas which says that if death happens every day at home, then nobody would cry. So this is also similar lines mein. So once the events keep recurring, people become numb to it, then they don't look at it as tragedy, correct? So this is the first instance. Okay, the second perspective to this is people would laugh at because those people who are responsible for the recurrence have not been able to take any steps to prevent that recurrence. That means they would laugh at the inability and incompetence of the people who have failed to take steps to prevent the recurrence. So that becomes farce. Same, let us apply this to the same our example of UPSC preparation. You have, first time you don't do writing practice, then everybody would be like, Arey Papa, everybody would feel sympathetic to you. Then again, third time also, there will be jokes around you stating that that fellow will just clear prelims. Anyway, he doesn't do writing practice. He will claim himself to be very well read, very hardworking, but still he will not clear. People will look upon your failure as joke. This is what most of us have experienced. I think even you can feel the same with regard to COVID also. When COVID first wave came, okay, everyone was alert, scared, apprehensive, whatnot. Then people actually did not learn to use the mask. Then the second wave also came. Then second wave came and it turned to be very fatal. Then it was tragic. Then what happened to the third wave? People became numb to the habit of COVID appropriate behavior, and people started taking it way too lightly. So the recurrence for the second time is nothing but farce. Then friends, once we have explained the meaning, essence, then we have to explain as to how this event gets manifested at various levels. So this manifestation means, see, this repetition of turn of events happens at individual level, happens at societal level, happens at national level also. Correct? So let us take the example of individual level. How does it happen? Because a person has to learn from his mistakes, right? A person has to learn from his mistake. A person who does not learn from his mistakes, would keep committing his mistake, would first feel the tragedy and then would feel it to be farce. Same example of UPSC preparation can be applied to individual level. But there are similar examples to societal levels also. See, finally, I feel the best example is the many social movements that have taken place to eradicate caste system in India. Such movements, actually their noble aim was to eradicate the caste system and to create a casteless society. Okay, but once the founder of that movement or the front runner of the movement passed away, the movement lost all its steam. Then what happened? Those people who became his followers, claiming to be casteless, started grouping themselves into a separate caste. Is that not tragedy? Those people who came out of the caste system to remain casteless grouped themselves into a separate caste. Correct? That is tragedy. Is it not tragedy? It's very disappointing, right? Then they went one step ahead. Then what they did? They started creating subcastes among themselves, taking reference to the same old caste from which they exited. Correct? That is joke. Is it not joke? A person belonging to caste A, caste B, caste C would come out, some people claiming that they don't belong, they are casteless and they don't belong to caste A or caste B or caste C. Then they create something called caste D. Okay? This is tragedy. Then what happens? Within that caste D, there are subcastes. Again, the person who has come from caste A into caste D would claim himself to be caste DA. Like he is a subcaste having reference to caste A. Like that caste DB, caste DC. So something like that. So is this not joke? That's how even the history repeats itself as tragedy and then as farce at societal level. Then let us take the example at national level. Even at national level, this has happened. I feel the best example is some of the countries where democratic government and dictatorships have alternated. Where for the first time, when the democratic government is toppled by a military dictator, then it is felt to be a tragedy, right? But again, then some democratic government is set up, and then again, if the dictatorship comes back for the second time, it becomes a joke. It becomes a joke because the democratic institutions are set up so weakly that they can never sustain themselves. So, thus this gets manifested at individual level, societal level, even at national level. So, the entire thing is that the whole essence of this topic is that he is all about learning lessons from past experiences. A person who learns from past experiences will definitely bound to create a better future. If lessons are not learned for the second time, then adversities befall on such individual. Correct? Then if lessons are not learned for the third time also, then it becomes a joke. If you learn lesson for the first time, then the second time would not arise only. But anyway, second attempt also happens. That is tragedy. Then you don't learn, then it becomes a joke because everybody would laugh at you. So this is the whole essence of the essay. While explaining this essence, then you have to set the tone to the essay, stating that this essay seeks to explore whether history should necessarily repeat always first as tragedy and then as farce, or the attempt is to, the moot question is whether it would repeat always like that or otherwise also. So something like that you can write and you can start analyzing you can start elaborating the essay. So now friends, why history repeats first as tragedy and then as farce? The first and foremost thing is false self-confidence. Isn't it, friends? This recurrence happens because of failure to learn lessons. Why do we fail to learn lessons? Because of false self-confidence. A person who is supposed to change himself, a person who is supposed to understand or learn from the mistakes and take different types of decisions would not do so, because he has false self-confidence on himself, he has false self-confidence on his ideologies, he has false self-confidence on his thoughts, convictions, so he refuses to change. This is the first and foremost thing. So that is false self-confidence. If that false self-confidence is not there, every person would definitely change. And then next is, of course, refusal to change. This resistance to change is very, very tricky, because a person, even though he has experienced adversities in the existing system, would be scared to shun the existing system and go to a new system. So thus refusal to change is very difficult. For example, the best example is natural disasters, friends. Let us say there is a deluge, there is a flood that has inundated riverbanks very badly. So those people who have unauthorizedly encroached on the riverbank, who have unauthorizedly put up huts or constructed houses on the riverbank, have faced lot of problems during inundation, and they may have even lost their near and dear ones, they may have lost their property, etc., etc. The life would have been so difficult for them. But even then, they would not prefer to leave those riverbanks and go get settled in a different place for various reasons. So they are ready, thus that mindset of refusal to move out would lead to tragedy. But if they continue to stay there even after facing the adversity for the second time, it becomes a joke. Everybody would laugh at them. They are like that only. So this is what that refusal change is all about. Third thing is, today's solution is equal to tomorrow's problem. Sometimes what happens, see, when would history not recur? Whenever we have learned lessons from the past and we have devised a solution. Correct? Sometimes those solutions, we are not sure it's a new solution. Unless that solution gets played out in the field, many adverse effects or consequences of the solution would not have been felt. Correct? In such a scenario, the solution for today's problem may, instead of preventing the recurrence of the problem, would accentuate the problem also in most of the cases. Correct? See, the best example is eradication of plastic. Correct? So, all of us are aware that plastic is a menace. So, since plastic is a menace, suddenly there is a environmental, ecological consciousness amongst all the citizens and all the civic bodies also. So, everyone wants to ban the plastic. Okay, you ban the plastic because it's a non-biodegradable thing. It will remain in environment forever, leading to all sorts of problems. But if you ban the plastic, what is the alternative that you get? Mostly the alternatives that you get for plastic, which claim themselves to be not plastic, also have, most of the alternatives also have though they are not plastic, but they also have equally similar adverse effects of plastic itself. So we so many times whatever plastic, alternatives of the plastic bags that we use today, they are also not biodegradable. So you are just removing plastic and putting some other material which again carries the same nuisance value of plastic. Then this is another problem, another reason why history would repeat as tragedy and then as farce. Then the last thing is, then another thing is uncontrollable variables. What are these uncontrollable variables? See, human endeavor to control adversities and to welcome positive issues is very much limited. There is lot of the universe and the nature is so wide, it has so many variables which are beyond the control of human mind or human intellect. Correct? The best example is mutated variant of COVID. Correct? See, human intellect was able to find out a vaccine that could prevent the spread of COVID infection caused from the initial variant, right? But later the COVID virus mutated itself and took upon itself a new form for which the vaccine was ineffective. Correct? But does human intellect have the ability to prevent? Does human intellect have the control over COVID virus to prevent itself from mutating? No, right? So thus there are many uncontrollable variables on the earth, because of which the history, despite learning from the mistakes, despite attempting to prevent the recurrence, would recur first as tragedy and maybe later as farce. And next is unable to prevent recurrence. See, this is closely linked to the previous point itself. The previous point what I was arguing is that there are some uncontrollable variables upon which human intellect has no control. Similarly, but for the sake of churning out one more point in order to fetch more marks, you can also say that so many times there may be dearth of knowledge as to how to prevent the recurrence. See, let us take the example of natural disasters only. See, we can prepare to manage natural disasters. We can prepare to reduce the adverse impacts of natural disasters. But do we really have the knowledge to prevent or the ability to prevent the natural disasters themselves? Can you prevent flood? Can you prevent earthquake? Can you prevent tsunami? No. So thus, so many times there is lack of knowledge as to how to prevent the recurrence. Though we are ready to learn from the mistakes of the past, but learning from the mistakes of the past would not just help unless such learnings are applied for coming up with a practicable and actionable solutions. Friends, as all of us are aware, we have to pause. Once we are arguing for the topic, we have to pause and question ourselves, or we have to counter argue the essay topic itself. Correct? That is where you introduce an element of analysis. So here what is that? See, now I have said why history repeats itself as for tragedy and then farce. But then you have to pose a question, would history always repeat like that only? No. Definitely no. There are chances, if lessons are learnt, there are chances that history would repeat as comedy also. Correct? So the best example is feedback loop. That means if the society or an individual or a nation, if it has the habit of observing keenly every incident and then learning from it in order to understand what are all the good things about that incident have to be continued and the bad things about that incident have to be discouraged. So if that feedback loop gets established and the feedback gets integrated into the decision making, then perhaps history would not repeat like that. So the best example is how South Korea managed COVID, right? Because South Korea's success in management of COVID is attributed to its experience of managing MERS virus. We are all aware, right? Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome virus had actually affected South Korea like some 4-5 years ago. But because of that experience, they had understood the importance of testing infrastructure. So as soon as the COVID got diagnosed or detected in China, they got alerted and they ensured that COVID testing infrastructure or testing kits reach even the remotest village of Korea even before the first case of COVID was diagnosed in Korea. Correct. So once testing is in place, it is easy for us to find out the patients and COVID patients and then isolate themselves. So this lack of testing infrastructure is one of the reasons why COVID spread like wildfire in many countries. So it is the experience of managing MERS that made South Korea prepare itself better for handling COVID. So that feedback loop is important. And then change in decision makers. See friends, history, let us say there is a dictator or there is a leader who is very aggressive in his mindset, who is offensive in his mindset. Correct. So such a leader, such a dictator would not tone down, would keep waging the wars, even that would mean afflicting a lot of civilian casualties, lot of loss to his own country. Correct. If that leader gets changed and let us say there is a more practicable, peace-loving leader comes in place, finally he would take decisions that would avoid the war as much as possible. So change in, then finally luck friends. Just as uncontrollable variables have the tendency to lead to recurrence of adverse events, same uncontrollable variables which we can call luck have the ability to ensure that the recurrence would not be severe. Correct. I feel the best example is Omicron itself. Omicron was not fatal. Correct. That because of that there were very few casualties. Correct. What was the reason for it? It is sheer luck. Then it is time to conclude friends. So we can very well conclude stating that history has the tendency to repeat itself. However, it is the bounden duty of the society, nation and the individuals to learn from history, find out the positive spin-offs of those events and take steps to advance such positive spin-offs, and also to identify negative spin-offs and also to take steps to prevent recurrence of those negative spin-offs. Basically it is feedback loop and learning from the past and genuine attempt to prevent the recurrence is predominantly important. Hope I have made sense friends. We will meet next week with another topic. Thank you. All the best. Happy reading.